think Jerusalem is one of the most complicated areas in the world. So my challenge to you is, can you explain the geopolitical things that are going on here in Jerusalem in a very simple way?
There's nothing simple about Jerusalem, and I'll try very hard. You can imagine it like a building with 5 stories. The bottom story is geography, just understanding the borders of Jerusalem. What are the municipal borders of Jerusalem? Where's east, where's west, north and south? And what was before 1967, what was after 1967? This is the very basic. Then our next floor is demography, demographics, population details. For example, how many Jews live in Jerusalem? How many Arabs live in Jerusalem? How many Christians live in Jerusalem? And where do they live? A very, very important part of understanding Jerusalem. Then we go to the third level. The third level is understanding legal rights. Many people in Europe accuse Israel of building illegally in East Jerusalem, or that we are illegally occupying Palestinian lands. Who does Jerusalem really belong to under international law? We who are believing people, we know that God gave us this land in the Bible. It's the most important legal book and historic and book of faith. But under international law, who does Jerusalem belong to? And our fourth story is security. What are the security challenges, the security threats that are facing Jerusalem, and how do we deal with them, and where are they coming from? So those 4 stories that we build up one by one will bring us to the penthouse. The penthouse is understanding the strategic challenges that are facing Jerusalem. In other words, what do we do with the future of Jerusalem? Where do we go? And in order to try and understand what the options are for the future of Jerusalem, should we keep Jerusalem united? Should it be divided? What brings peace? In order to understand those very difficult questions, we have to build our building, and that's what we're going to do today. So it's difficult in a TV interview to give all the answers, because showing it with your eyes and seeing it in 3 dimensions helps one understand it much, much more. But I'll try and sum up some of the issues. First of all, we say that Jerusalem is a united city today. In 1967, in the Six-Day War, Israel was attacked by Jordan, and thank God we defeated Jordan. In fact, one of the major battles in the Six-Day War took place over here in Ammunition Hill, where we fought the Jordanians on the first night of the war. We lost 26 soldiers here, but we defeated the Jordanians, and then from there we went to Mount Scopus and the Mount of Olives, and soon after conquering that, we finally entered the Old City and liberated the Old City after 19 years of Jordanian occupation. So that was the unification of Jerusalem. Western Jerusalem was then unified with the eastern part of the city that was occupied by the Jordanians for 19 years. And then the Israeli government expanded the borders of Jerusalem to the borders that exist today, which the size of eastern Jerusalem went up from 7 square kilometers to 70 square kilometers. It's a much, much larger area than existed before. So that's what we call United Jerusalem. And when we look at the population statistics, we're going to go to the second floor now, demographics. Today the situation is that there are about 890,000 people living all over Jerusalem, of which there are about 25,000 Christians. And the rest are about 300,000 Arabs, who mostly live in the eastern part of the city, and in about 550,000 Jews who live in Jerusalem. Half of them live on the eastern side of the city, and half of them in the western side of the city. Bit complicated demographics, but there's one important point that we try help people understand in this trip. And that is, when we look at all the population of Jerusalem today, 40% of the city are Arabs. And that is a demographic which to many of us is a bit worrying, because the number of Arab residents is going up and the number of Jewish residents is going down. This is because Jews are leaving the city because they cannot afford to buy apartments here, and the job opportunities are not as much as they should be, and they're looking in other places where there's more affordable housing and jobs. The Arabs are coming to Jerusalem because they mostly build illegally, and they live in apartments, and we're going to see that today on the tour. They live in apartments that are built without permits, and they find job opportunities here. And so in the last 30 years, we've seen a situation where the number of Arabs has increased in Jerusalem and the number of Jews has decreased. And this is eroding the Jewish majority in Jerusalem. And we are very worried that if the Arab numbers continue to increase, they will eventually take over the city hall. They can vote if they want to. Today they don't vote. But if they decide to vote in 5 years' time, they can vote in a Hamas mayor or an Arab mayor, democratically voted, and take over the city hall and take over the budgets and take over the committees. Now, this is a democracy in Israel. We wouldn't throw them out. We can't prevent it if they do vote. But what we do think is that we think that Jerusalem certainly should remain with a Jewish majority under Israeli democratic sovereignty and with the priorities focused towards freedom of religion, freedom of opportunity, which, as we know, under a Muslim control is not always the case.
Wouldn't it be possible that the Arabs would choose a mayor that is an Arab mayor but a very moderate person? That's also a possibility, right?
Well, let's take a look at the Arab candidate that ran in the last municipal elections. There was an Arab that decided that he was going to run, and his faction was called Al-Jerusalem. In Arabic, in other words, the implication was Jerusalem does not belong to the Jews, it belongs to us, the Muslims. And if you just look at the propaganda of many of the Arab parties, it is a propaganda which does not recognize the Jewish state and says that we have stolen Palestinian land. And if you come up with me to the third floor, the floor of legal rights, we will see that Jerusalem and all of Israel belongs legally to the Jewish people. And to come and to claim that we've stolen Palestinian lands is just not correct. It's not true. And therefore, if this person is coming to say that we've stolen their land, really what they're saying is we want to expel the Jews. We want to steal the Jewish land from the state of Israel, from the Jews, and we want to take it over and turn it into another caliphate maybe, another Hamas area, another ISIS area. I think, God forbid, if that would happen, it would be very, very bad for the state of Israel and for freedom and democracy, and certainly for Christianity all over the world.
But the Arabs are not the only ones who are saying that Israel is here illegally in East Jerusalem. It's also the entire international world.
That is correct. That is correct, and it pains me, it hurts me when I hear this. Our organization, Keep Jerusalem, which you can see on the internet, keepjerusalem.org, we're a public diplomacy organization, an advocacy and educational organization, which educates people about the truth. And if you just dig a little bit, you can see that the truth, the historic truth, is that the land of Israel, under international law, under international agreements, belongs to the Jewish people. We never stole anybody's land. On the contrary, the Jordanians illegally occupied the Judea and Samaria, what they call the West Bank, and Jerusalem for 19 years. The Palestinians have zero rights to Jerusalem or to Judea and Samaria under international law. So the people who say that we are taking over Palestinian lands or it belongs to them, in my opinion, are either just misinformed, ignorant, or anti-Semitic.
Okay, that's a big thing to say.
Let's take a look, and I'm an expert on understanding those kinds of people, and I would say that a minority of them are really anti-Semitic people who hate Jews and just want to expel us from our land. But I think the majority, the vast majority of the people who think that we are in Palestinian lands are simply people that are misinformed, uninformed, or ignorant.
So give me one argument how we can convince them otherwise.
Well, you just have to check the facts. And the problem is that people like me and organizations like Keep Jerusalem are not getting enough of exposure, and I thank you for this exposure, to the world, to Europe, to America, to tell the truth. And the truth is the following. In 1922, the League of Nations issued the Mandate for Palestine, which was an international document that was unanimously approved by all the nations in the League of Nations, that said the land of Israel, and certainly everything from the Jordan westwards, including Judea and Samaria, West Bank, including Eastern Jerusalem, including all the rest of Israel, that land belongs to the Jewish people. It was ratified under international law, and anybody who searches will see that there's never been another document that has cancelled this mandate for Palestine, that has substituted, that has modified it, that has exchanged it. That document is the most valid document which defines the rights to the land of Israel under international law. Obviously, under biblical law, under faith, we all know that it belongs to the Jewish people. I'm just talking about international law.
About 47?
47, there was a partition plan, right, which was voted in the United Nations, and that was simply a recommendation. Anybody who knows international law knows that that vote was completely rejected by the Arab countries, and because of that, it never was voted on in the Security Council of the United Nations, and therefore it remained only a recommendation with no legal validity. So therefore, we have to go back to the previous document that was valid, and that was the 1922 document, which gave the Jewish people the rights to all the land of Israel.
How do you explain the fact that everybody is having an opinion about Israel? We don't have an opinion about Argentina, but why about Israel?
Because we are the land that God's eyes are looking at it all the time, as we see in the Torah. It says that the land of Israel is God's land, and God is looking at this land all the time. And therefore, the world also looks at this land and looks at the Jewish people who are God's children. And we understand that. We accept that as a mission. And that's why we have to be extra moral. We have to be extra careful about what we do. But on the other hand, we want to be careful about carrying out God's word. And God says to us, come back to this land, build up the land, build up Jerusalem, and we are doing that. But there are people that think that this is a bad thing, and maybe precisely because we're trying to do God's words, that they are against us.
But can you understand it, that people are so hostile against Israel? The media, the politics, can you explain that? I find anti-Semitism very difficult to understand. I think it's disgusting. I think it's racist. And I feel bad that there are so many people, and you see today in Europe especially, an upsurge in anti-Semitism and Jew-hating. And there's no rational explanation. The misinformation and the ignorance is something we can change, and we need to change. And this is something that we can do together to change those narratives and those attitudes and opinions. If you think what I said earlier, our target audience are mostly the people that are ignorant and are misinformed. And that's most of the people. The rabid anti-Semites and the far left are the minority, right? In the world, they're just people that don't know. And therefore, they are against Israel, but they don't know why. And when we come and tell them the truth and give them the facts, we find that there's a big shift over to supporting Israel and understanding and appreciating the facts, because they are happy that they finally received some information that is truth. And we have managed to influence and impact hundreds of thousands of people around the world. Have you been born in Israel?
No, I was born in South Africa, and I moved here nearly 40 years ago. Ek praat Afrikaans. But I'm very happy to live here in Israel for many years. All my children I have 7 children. They were all born here. My wife is also originally from South Africa, but today I'm an Israeli.
Where do you live?
I live in a settlement in a community called Beit El, which is about 25 kilometers north of Jerusalem, right next door Ramallah. And I live in a place where Jacob had his dream, as mentioned in the book of Genesis. When he was going out of Israel, he lay down on the rock and dreamed about a ladder and angels going up and down the ladder, a very important dream in the Bible. And that took place in Beit El. So it's a wonderful, holy place that we live in.
Your family was recently in the world news. Can you share with me what it was about?
I have two married children, a twin boy and girl, and my daughter, who is married to a wonderful guy. My daughter's name is Shira, and she's married to Amichai. They got married just about a year ago, and Shira was 7 months pregnant. They live also in Samaria, in Elon Moreh, and on the 8th night of Chanukah, they were trying to get a bus or a hitchhike back home. They were standing outside the community of Ofra, and vile terrorists who were driving in a white car drove by, opened the window and opened up fire with an automatic rifle on the people standing at the bus stop. One of them was my 7-month pregnant daughter Shira. She was shot and critically injured. Her husband Amichai was also shot with 3 bullets in her leg. Thank God the paramedics managed to save her life and slow down the bleeding and get her to hospital in Jerusalem. There she was operated on. She was in a critical situation. She lost 5 liters of blood. They had to extract her baby in a C-section because of her life was in danger. The baby unfortunately died after 3 days. They named him Amiad Yisrael, which means the nation of Israel will live forever. And this was a very tragic experience for our family, and certainly for our daughter and son-in-law. But thank God they are on their way to healing. The emotional healing will take a lot longer, but they are up on their feet and slowly but surely getting better. And we are trying to take this experience and elevate it and use it to strengthen our hold on the land of Israel, our hold on Jerusalem, because the terrorists and the haters of Israel and the haters of the Jewish people, they want to uproot us from our land. They want to kill Jews. What we need to do is bring more Jews to the world and strengthen our hold on our land.
Do you hate the Arabs who did this to your daughter and to your son-in-law?
I hate people that hate other people. In other words, I don't believe we should hate anybody. We hate ideas, we hate philosophies, but God tells us that we should love everybody. But if somebody chooses to do terrorism, to kill other people, I believe these people must be punished, they must be deterred. So was I happy when the terrorist that killed my daughter was eliminated? I was happy in a small personal level, but I was rather much more happy on a national level to think that maybe more terrorists have been deterred, more terrorists have been prevented, because if they know they can get away with it, then they will do a lot more. If they know they will be killed or captured, hopefully they will be deterred.
Was there a moment after the attack that you thought maybe it's not worth it to live in Samaria because these terrible things can happen to you? Maybe it's not worth it and we have to go and live somewhere else.
Not one moment. On the contrary, I understand that the vile and inhuman terrorists, their goal is to uproot us from our land. And that is very bad. If God forbid that would happen, it would destroy Israel and destroy what God wants in this world. And therefore, on the contrary, our desire to root ourselves more in the land, to bring more Jews to Judea and Samaria, more Jews to Eastern Jerusalem, is the answer. Not to flee, not to give up, because that would be a victory for terrorism and anti-Semitism.
Is there something you would like to say to the audience, how they can defend Israel in their own surroundings?
First of all, if you can, visit Israel and see it for yourself. Secondly, educate yourselves about Israel, about Jerusalem. Get the facts so that you can defend Israel in the court of international opinion, in the world of anti-Semitism, misinformation. Educate yourselves, and you can be an ambassador for Israel and for Jerusalem, and you can help make our country a holier and better place for Jews and Christians and Arabs to live, so that, please God, ultimately we are all looking for that coveted peace that should come to our area.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.